In the small town of Willow Creek, life moved at a slow pace. Everyone knew each other and gossip traveled faster than the wind. Among the people who stood out was a high school senior named Emily Carter. She wasn't just another student, she was someone everyone admired for her sharp mind and hard work. Teachers spoke highly of her, often saying she had a natural gift for learning. Her classmates looked up to her too, always turning to her when they needed help with tough assignments. Emily's favorite subject was math. Numbers came easily to her, almost like second nature. Whether it was solving complex equations or understanding difficult theories, she never seemed to struggle. It wasn't that she didn't put in effort. She studied harder than most, but there was something about her approach that made everything click effortlessly. Her teachers noticed this too. They'd often say, "If anyone can make sense of calculus, it's Emily." One crisp morning, the entire class filed into the room for their big calculus exam. This test wasn't just any ordinary assessment. It carried a lot of weight for final grades. Students shuffled nervously in their seats, flipping through pages of notes one last time before Mr. Thompson, their strict but respected teacher, walked in. He placed the stack of papers on his desk and gave the usual instructions. No talking, no cheating, and complete silence until the bell rang. As the test began, Mr. Thompson paced around the classroom, keeping a watchful eye on everyone. His gaze lingered on different students, ensuring no one tried anything sneaky. But then something caught his attention. When he passed by Emily's desk, he paused for a moment. Unlike her peers, who were scribbling furiously, biting their nails or staring blankly at their papers, Emily seemed unusually calm. There was no panic in her expression, no frantic erasing or rewriting. Instead, she wrote steadily, almost as if she already knew every answer. Curious, Mr. Thompson leaned slightly over her shoulder to glance at her paper. What he saw left him puzzled. Several problems were already solved, written neatly in her familiar handwriting. These weren't simple questions either. They were some of the hardest ones on the test. How could she have finished them so quickly? And why did it feel like she hadn't even hesitated? Mr. Thompson shook his head and continued walking, telling himself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she had practiced extensively and memorized similar problems. That would explain her speed, right? But deep down, doubt lingered. Over the years, he had seen countless students try to take shortcuts during exams. Cheating wasn't uncommon, especially among those desperate to secure good grades. Yet accusing someone without solid evidence went against his principles. Still, he couldn't ignore what he'd observed. After the test ended, Mr. Thompson collected the papers and spent hours grading them late into the evening. As he reviewed Emily's answers, his suspicions grew stronger. Not only were all her solutions correct, but they also followed methods he hadn't explicitly taught in class. Where had she learned these techniques? Why did her performance seem so flawless compared to previous tests where she usually took more time? The inconsistencies gnawed at him. By the next day, Mr. Thompson had made up his mind. He needed answers, and he decided to confront Emily privately after school. Summoning her to his office, he prepared himself for what might be an uncomfortable conversation. Little did he know, this decision would set off a chain of events neither of them could have anticipated. The next afternoon, Emily walked into Mr. Thompson's office, her heart pounding like a drum. She'd been called out of class unexpectedly, and though she didn't know why, the serious look on her teacher's face told her this wasn't going to be a casual chat. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, each second stretching longer than the last. Emily sat down across from him, clutching her bag tightly in her lap. Mr. Thompson leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. His expression was stern, almost as if he were about to deliver bad news. After a brief pause, he finally spoke. "Emily," he began, his voice firm but measured. "I need to talk to you about yesterday's exam." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "The calculus test?" she asked, her tone uncertain. "Yes," Mr. Thompson replied. "There are some things that don't add up, and I think it's important we address them." Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. What do you mean? Did I make a mistake? No, he said quickly, shaking his head. In fact, quite the opposite. Your answers were perfect. Too perfect, if you ask me. She frowned, confused. Too perfect? What does that mean? Mr. Thompson hesitated for a moment before continuing. Emily, I've known you for years now. You're one of my brightest students, and I've always appreciated your dedication. But yesterday, during the exam, I noticed something unusual. You seemed overly confident, and when I glanced at your paper, you had already solved several problems within minutes. That's not normal, even for someone as talented as you. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She could feel heat rising to her cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and frustration bubbling inside her. Finally, she managed to say, I studied really hard for this test, sir. I promise I didn't cheat or anything. I want to believe you, Mr. Thompson said, leaning back slightly. But there are inconsistencies here that I can't ignore. For example, the methods you used to solve some of the problems. They're not ones I've taught in class. Where did you learn them? Her mind raced. She wanted to explain, to make him understand, but how could she put into words what she herself barely understood? All she knew was that the solutions had come naturally, to her almost instinctively. It wasn't like she'd copied them from anywhere, they just felt right. Sir, she said slowly, trying to stay calm, I didn't use any outside resources. Those answers, they just made sense to me. I swear I didn't cheat. Mr. Thompson sighed, rubbing his temples. He looked torn between believing her and sticking to his suspicions. Emily, I don't doubt your abilities. You're smart. Smarter than most students I've taught. But sometimes people take shortcuts without realizing the consequences. If you did get help somehow, intentionally or not, it's better to admit it now rather than later. Each word hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, refusing to cry. I didn't cheat, she repeated, her voice trembling. I worked hard for this. Why won't you believe me? The room fell silent again, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Mr. Thompson studied her for a moment, searching her face for any sign of dishonesty, but all he saw was genuine confusion and hurt. Still, he couldn't shake off his doubts completely. All right, he said finally, softening his tone a little. For now, let's leave it at that. But I'll be keeping an eye on your progress moving forward. Cheating is a serious offense, Emily, and I hope you understand why I'm concerned. With nothing left to say, Emily nodded silently and stood up. As she walked out of the office, she felt a lump in her throat. The accusation weighed heavily on her, making her chest feel tight. How could Mr. Thompson, someone she respected so much, think she'd stoop to cheating? The thought stung more than she cared to admit. Back in class, Emily tried to focus on the lesson, but her mind kept drifting back to the conversation. She replayed every word, wondering what she could have done differently to convince him. Maybe she should have explained herself better, or maybe she should have shown him her notes, proving just how much effort she'd put into preparing for the exam. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't have mattered. No matter what she said, Mr. Thompson's suspicions wouldn't disappear overnight. As the day wore on, Emily found herself growing angrier, not at Mr. Thompson, but at the situation itself. She had always prided herself on being honest and hard-working. Being accused of something she hadn't done felt like a slap in the face. Worse still, she could already imagine the rumors spreading around school. Word traveled fast in Willow Creek, and by tomorrow everyone would probably know about Mr. Thompson's accusations. By the time she got home, Emily was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally drained. She dropped her bag by the door and slumped onto the couch, staring blankly at the TV screen without really seeing it. Her thoughts kept circling back to the same question. How could she prove her innocence when even her own teacher doubted her? That evening, she decided to call her best friend Jake. They'd been close since childhood, and he was always the first person she turned to whenever life threw her a curveball. When he answered the phone, his cheerful greeting immediately lifted her spirits. Hey, Em, what's up? He asked, his voice warm and familiar. Emily hesitated for a moment before blurting out everything that had happened. She told him about the test, Mr. Thompson's suspicions, and how helpless she felt. To her relief, Jake listened patiently, offering words of encouragement when she needed them most. "Don't worry, Em," he said firmly. "We'll figure this out together. You're the most honest person I know, and anyone who says otherwise doesn't know you at all." His confidence gave her a small glimmer of hope. Together, they brainstormed ideas on how to clear her name. Jake suggested reviewing her study materials and comparing them with the test questions to show there was no foul play involved. He also encouraged her to keep track of anything unusual that might explain her performance, like flashes of insight or moments when solutions came to her unexpectedly. Though she still felt overwhelmed, Emily resolved to fight back. She wasn't going to let an unfair accusation define her. With Jake's support, she vowed to uncover the truth, not just for herself, but to prove to everyone that she was exactly who she claimed to be. A hard-working student who earned every success through grit and determination. The next morning, Emily woke up with a sense of purpose. She wasn't going to let Mr. Thompson's accusation break her spirit. Instead, she decided to dig deeper into what made her answers during the test seem so unusual. Jake had given her an idea, reviewing everything she'd studied and comparing it to the exam questions. If she could show that her knowledge came from hours of hard work, maybe she could clear her name. After breakfast, Emily sat down at her desk with stacks of notes, textbooks, and practice papers spread out in front of her. She flipped through page after page, retracing every step she'd taken while preparing for the calculus test. As she worked, memories of late nights and early mornings flooded back, the countless hours spent solving problems, watching online, tutorials, and rereading chapters until they made perfect sense. There was no denying how much effort she'd put in. But then something strange caught her attention. While reviewing her notes, Emily realized there were certain concepts she couldn't remember actively studying. They weren't part of their current syllabus, yet somehow she knew them inside out. At first, she thought maybe she'd picked them up from somewhere without realizing it, a random video or article, but nothing seemed familiar enough to explain it. As she stared at the equations scribbled on one of her notebooks, another memory surfaced. Over the past few months, she'd started having vivid dreams filled with numbers, formulas, and complex patterns. In these dreams, solutions would appear before her eyes as if written by an invisible hand. At the time, she dismissed them as random thoughts, fragments of her subconscious mind piecing together things she'd learned during the day. But now, looking closely, she noticed something extraordinary. Many of the formulas in her dreams matched the ones she'd used on the test, the same ones Mr. Thompson found suspicious. Excited but unsure what to make of this discovery, Emily grabbed a fresh notebook and began documenting her dreams more carefully. Every night she promised herself to write down whatever she remembered upon waking up. She didn't know if it would help prove her innocence, but at least it gave her something tangible to focus on. Over the next few days, Emily's dream journal became her most prized possession. Each entry revealed more details about the mysterious equations that kept appearing in her sleep. Some were simple calculations, while others looked like advanced theories far beyond high school math. Despite not fully understanding all of them, Emily felt a strange connection to the patterns. It was almost as though her brain was processing information faster than she could consciously grasp. Jake noticed the change in her behavior. He saw how focused and determined she'd become, pouring every ounce of energy into uncovering the truth. One evening, when he visited her house, he found her surrounded by papers, books, and her growing dream journal. Curious, he asked her what she was working on. "I've been writing down stuff from my dreams," Emily explained, showing him the journal. "Look at this equation here. It's similar to one I wrote on the test." Jake skimmed through the pages, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "Whoa, Em, these are really complicated. Are you sure you didn't learn them somewhere?" She shook her head. "Nope. That's the thing. I don't even recognize half of them, but somehow they feel natural. Like I already know them." Jake leaned back, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "This is wild. Do you think it's possible your brain is doing something special? Like maybe you're tapping into some kind of hidden talent?" Emily shrugged. "I don't know. All I know is that I need to figure it out." If I can understand why these dreams happen, maybe I can prove to Mr. Thompson that I didn't cheat. Inspired by her determination, Jake suggested, taking her findings to someone who might have answers. Why don't we show this to Dr. Martinez, he proposed. You know, the retired mathematician who lives near Main Street. She's super smart and loves helping students. Maybe she can explain what's going on. At first, Emily hesitated. The idea of sharing such personal details with a stranger felt intimidating. What if Dr. Martinez thought she was making things up? But Jake reassured her, pointing out that they had nothing to lose. After some deliberation, Emily agreed. They arranged to meet the following weekend. In the meantime, life at school grew increasingly difficult. Rumors about the cheating scandal spread like wildfire, fueled by whispers in hallways and hushed conversations during lunch breaks. Some students sided with Emily, believing she was innocent, while others cast judgmental glances her way. Even teachers treated her differently, watching her closely during class as if expecting her to slip up again. Despite the mounting pressure, Emily tried to stay strong. She reminded herself why she was doing this, not just to clear her name, but to understand the truth behind her unique abilities. Every night she continued adding entries to her dream journal, hoping to piece together the puzzle. Finally, the day arrived for their meeting with Dr. Martinez. Nervous but hopeful, Emily packed her notes and dream journal into her bag and headed to the address Jake had given her. When they reached the cozy little house on Main Street, they were greeted by a kind-faced woman with silver hair and glasses perched on her nose. Come in, Dr. Martinez said warmly, ushering them inside. Her living room was filled, with shelves stacked with books and papers, giving it the feel of a library. After introductions, Emily explained her situation, showing Dr. Martinez her dream journal and the equations she'd recorded. Dr. Martinez listened intently, occasionally nodding or jotting down notes. When Emily finished speaking, the older woman took off her glasses and leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. This is fascinating, Dr. Martinez said slowly. These aren't ordinary calculations. Some of these equations align with cutting-edge research in theoretical physics. It's almost as though your subconscious mind is accessing information beyond what we typically encounter in classrooms. Emily exchanged a glance with Jake, both of them stunned by the revelation. Could it really be true? Was her brain capable of processing advanced concepts without her realizing it? Dr. Martinez went on to explain that people sometimes possess rare cognitive abilities, often linked to heightened intuition or synesthesia, a condition where senses overlap, allowing individuals to perceive the world differently. Though she couldn't say for sure whether Emily fit into this category, the evidence pointed toward something extraordinary. Armed with this newfound understanding, Emily felt a surge of hope. For the first time since the accusation, she had a plausible explanation for her performance on the test. Now all she needed to do was share it with Mr. Thompson, and hopefully convince him once and for all that she hadn't cheated. The next day, Emily felt a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside her. She had spent the entire night going over everything Dr. Martinez had said, trying to make sense of it all. The idea that her brain might be doing something extraordinary was both thrilling and overwhelming. But now came the hard part, convincing Mr. Thompson. He wasn't just any teacher, he was someone who prided himself on fairness and discipline. Convincing him wouldn't be easy, but she knew she had no choice. This was her chance to prove her innocence. That afternoon, after school hours, Emily knocked on the door of Mr. Thompson's office. Her heart raced as she waited for him to call her in. When she finally stepped inside, she noticed the usual stack of papers on his desk and the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. For a moment she hesitated, unsure where to begin. But then she remembered how much effort she'd put into gathering evidence, and her resolve strengthened. "Sir?" she started, her voice steady, despite the nerves swirling in her stomach. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened last week, the test and your concerns." Mr. Thompson looked up from his work, surprised to see her there. He gestured for her to sit down, his expression guarded but curious. "All right, Emily, what do you want to say?" Taking a deep breath, Emily placed her dream journal and a folder containing notes from Dr. Martinez on his desk. First, I want to thank you for caring enough to bring this up. I know you're only trying to protect the integrity of the class, but I also need you to understand that I didn't cheat. These are my answers because they're mine. Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. What do you mean, they're yours? How can you explain solving problems using methods I haven't taught? Emily nodded, expecting his doubt. That's exactly why I'm here. To explain. Over the past few months, I've been having these vivid dreams. Not normal dreams, but ones filled with numbers, equations, and patterns. At first, I thought they were random, like my mind replaying things I'd studied during the day. But when I started writing them down, I realized something strange. They weren't random at all. She opened her dream journal and showed him page after page of neatly written equations. Some were simple, familiar concepts, but others were far more advanced than anything covered in their curriculum. See these? She asked, pointing to a particularly complex formula. This is one of the ones I used on the test. It came straight out of my dream. Mr. Thompson leaned forward, studying the pages carefully. His initial skepticism softened slightly, replaced by curiosity. And you're saying you dreamed these solutions? Yes, Emily replied firmly. But that's not all. I took this to someone who could help me understand what's happening. Her name is Dr. Martinez. She's a retired mathematician, and she looked at everything I brought her. According to her, some of these equations match theories being researched in advanced fields like quantum physics. At this point, Mr. Thompson sat back in his chair, visibly taken aback. Quantum physics? That's way beyond high school level. I know, Emily said, her voice tinged with awe. Even I don't fully understand it yet. But Dr. Martinez thinks my brain might have a rare ability, something called synesthesia, or heightened intuition. Basically, my subconscious seems to process information differently, almost like it's connecting dots I don't consciously see. To emphasize her point, Emily handed him the notes Dr. Martinez had prepared. They included explanations of her findings, along with references to real-world examples of people whose brains worked in similar ways. As Mr. Thompson read through the material, his expression shifted from doubt to disbelief, and finally to something resembling respect. After a long silence, he looked up at her, his tone softer than before. Emily, if what you're saying is true, then this changes everything. But why didn't you mention this earlier? Why didn't you tell me about these dreams? Emily sighed, feeling a lump rise in her throat. Because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Even I didn't fully understand it until recently. All I knew was that I hadn't cheated, but I couldn't explain why my answers seemed so unusual. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly, rubbing his chin as he processed everything. You're right, it does sound unbelievable. But if Dr. Martinez backs this up, he trailed off, shaking his head in amazement. I never imagined something like this could happen. Your brain is essentially doing math at a level most people can't even comprehend. For the first time since the accusation, Emily allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Mr. Thompson was starting to see the truth. Still, she needed to hear him say it outright. Sir, she said quietly, do you believe me now? Do you see that I didn't cheat? Mr. Thompson hesitated for a moment, his gaze fixed on her. Then with a sigh, he admitted, I'll be honest, Emily. I misjudged you. I let my assumptions get the better of me. Seeing all this evidence makes me realize how wrong I was to accuse you without understanding the full picture. Relief washed over Emily, followed quickly by a wave of gratitude. She hadn't expected him to admit his mistake so openly. Thank you for listening, she said softly. It means a lot to me. Mr. Thompson smiled faintly, though there was still a hint of guilt in his eyes. No, thank you for coming forward and explaining. Most students would have given up or gotten defensive, but you handled this with maturity and grace. I owe you an apology, Emily. As the weight of the accusation lifted, Emily felt lighter, freer. The conversation wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about rebuilding trust. And for the first time in days, she felt confident that things could go back to normal. Before leaving the office, Emily turned to Mr. Thompson one last time. "One more thing, sir. If it's okay with you, I'd like to share this with the rest of the class. Not because I want attention, but because I think it's important for everyone to know the truth." Mr. Thompson considered this for a moment, then nodded. "I think that's a good idea. Let's set aside some time tomorrow. We'll address the rumors and clear the air once and for all." With that, Emily left the office, her steps lighter than they'd been in days. Outside, the sun was setting, casting golden hues across the schoolyard. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening breeze against her face. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could breathe easily again. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Emily reflected on everything that had happened. From the moment Mr. Thompson accused her of cheating to the revelation about her unique abilities, it had been a whirlwind of emotions. But through it all, she'd stayed true to herself, refusing to give up even when things seemed impossible. And now, thanks to her determination, and a little help from Jake and Dr. Martinez, she had turned an accusation into an opportunity to learn more about herself. As sleep began to take hold, Emily wondered what other secrets her mind might hold. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing for sure: she was ready to face it. The next morning, Emily woke up with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in days. The weight that had been pressing down on her chest since Mr. Thompson's accusation was finally starting to lift. She knew the hardest part was still ahead, facing her classmates and addressing the rumors. But she felt ready. For once, she wasn't just fighting to clear her name. She was sharing something extraordinary about herself, something that made her unique. When she walked into school, heads turned. Whispers followed her down the hallway, just like they had for the past few days. But this time, Emily held her head high. She didn't avoid eye contact or quicken her pace. Instead, she smiled softly at anyone who looked her way, silently letting them know she wasn't ashamed. Jake met her at her locker, giving her an encouraging pat on the back. "You've got this, Em," he said, his tone full of confidence. "Just tell them the truth. They'll see how amazing you are." Emily nodded, grateful for his support. "Thanks, Jake. I couldn't have done any of this without you." As the first bell rang, students filed into their classrooms. By the time calculus class started, the atmosphere felt tense. Everyone knew something big was coming. Mr. Thompson stood at the front of the room, his expression serious but kind. When everyone settled into their seats, he cleared his throat and began speaking. "Before we dive into today's lesson," he said, "there's something important we need to address. Many of you may have heard rumors about Emily and the recent test. I want to take a moment to set the record straight." All eyes shifted to Emily, who sat quietly in her seat, hands folded neatly on her desk. She could feel the collective curiosity of the room hanging in the air. Taking a deep breath, she stood up and moved to the front, standing beside Mr. Thompson. "I know there's been talk about me cheating on the test," she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies fluttering in her stomach. "But I want to assure all of you, I didn't cheat. What happened isn't easy to explain, but I'm going to try because it's the truth." For the next several minutes, Emily recounted everything step by step. She talked about her love for math, the hours she'd spent studying, and how her answers came so naturally to her during the test. Then she explained the strange dreams she'd been having, the ones filled with numbers and equations, and how she'd started documenting them in a journal. Finally, she shared what Dr. Martinez had discovered, that some of the equations in her dreams matched advanced theories far beyond their current curriculum. When she finished speaking, the room fell silent. No one spoke, no one whispered. It was as if everyone was processing what they'd just heard. After a moment, one student raised their hand tentatively. "So, you're saying your brain is solving problems while you sleep?" the student asked, their tone a mix of disbelief and fascination. Emily smiled faintly. "That's exactly what I'm saying. Even I don't fully understand it yet, but it's true. These answers aren't copied or memorized, they're mine, even if they come from my dreams." Another student chimed in. "Does this mean you're like superhuman or something?" The question drew a few chuckles from the class, breaking the tension. Emily laughed lightly. Not superhuman, no, just different, I guess. My brain works in ways I can't always explain, but it's not magic. It's just how I'm wired. Mr. Thompson stepped forward then, adding his own thoughts. What Emily has shown us is truly remarkable. Most people go their whole lives without discovering such unique talents within themselves. Instead of doubting her, we should celebrate her achievements and learn from them. His words seemed to resonate with the class. Slowly, the skepticism gave way to admiration. Students began asking questions, not accusatory ones, but genuine, ones born out of curiosity. They wanted to know more about synesthesia, about dreams, about how someone could solve complex equations without consciously thinking about them. Emily answered each question patiently, feeling a growing sense of connection with her peers. By the end of the discussion, the mood in the room had completely shifted. Gone were the whispers and judgmental stares. In their place was respect and, maybe even a little awe. One girl approached Emily after class, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry for believing those rumors," she admitted. "I shouldn't have judged you before knowing the truth." "It's okay," Emily replied warmly. "I'm just glad everyone knows the real story now." Word of Emily's explanation spread quickly throughout the school. By lunchtime, teachers and students alike were talking about her incredible abilities. Some joked that she might be the next Einstein, while others marveled at the idea of solving math problems in dreams. What had started as a scandal turned into a source of inspiration. People began seeing Emily not as someone accused of wrongdoing, but as a prodigy, a role model for hard work and self-discovery. Even outside of school, news of Emily's talent reached the wider community. A local newspaper ran a feature article about her, highlighting her dedication and the groundbreaking nature of her abilities. Universities took notice too, sending letters inviting her to apply for scholarships and specialized programs. Suddenly, opportunities she'd never imagined were opening up before her. Despite the newfound attention, Emily remained grounded. She continued attending classes, working hard and helping her friends whenever they needed it. Her relationship with Mr. Thompson improved significantly. He became one of her strongest supporters, often checking in to see how she was managing the spotlight. Together, they decided to explore whether her abilities could be studied further, perhaps through research collaborations with universities or experts in cognitive science. One afternoon, sitting alone in the library, Emily reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. From being accused of cheating to becoming a celebrated figure, the journey had been anything but easy. Yet through it all, she'd stayed true to herself. She realized that adversity wasn't something to fear. It was an opportunity to grow, to discover strengths she didn't know she had. As graduation approached, Emily found herself standing at the top of her class, delivering the valedictorian speech. Looking out at the sea of familiar faces, she smiled warmly, remembering every challenge and triumph along the way. "To my teachers, my family, and my friends," she said, her voice ringing clear across the auditorium. "Thank you for believing in me when I doubted myself, and thank you for teaching me that sometimes the truth is stranger and more beautiful than fiction." Her words earned a standing ovation, applause echoing through the hall long after she stepped away from the podium. As she hugged her parents and posed for photos with her diploma, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for where she was, but for the journey that had brought her here. Looking toward the future, Emily knew her path wouldn't always be smooth. There would be challenges ahead, questions she couldn't answer, and moments of doubt. But she also knew she had the strength to face them head-on. After all, she'd already proven that she was capable of achieving the impossible, even if it came to her in her dreams. Graduation day came and went in a blur of caps, gowns, and tearful goodbyes. Emily stood on the stage under the bright sun, her heart swelling with pride as she accepted her diploma. She wasn't just graduating at the top of her class, she was stepping into a future full of possibilities. The accusations that had once loomed over her now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the incredible journey she'd been through. As she looked out at the crowd, she saw familiar faces, her parents beaming with pride, Jake clapping enthusiastically from the audience, and even Mr. Thompson nodding approvingly from his seat among the faculty members. But this wasn't the end of Emily's story, it was only the beginning. Over the summer, she dove deeper into understanding her unique abilities. With Dr. Martinez's guidance, she began exploring areas of advanced mathematics and theoretical physics, fields that aligned closely with the equations she'd encountered in her dreams. It was challenging, no doubt, but also exhilarating. For the first time, Emily felt like she was truly tapping into her potential, uncovering layers of her mind she hadn't known existed. Her newfound fame brought opportunities she could hardly have imagined. Local newspapers continued to feature stories about her, calling her the girl who solves math in her sleep. Universities across the country sent letters inviting her to join their programs, offering scholarships and research grants. Some even proposed collaborations with scientists eager to study her cognitive processes. At first, the attention overwhelmed her. But with Jake's support and plenty of late-night talks with her family, Emily learned to embrace it. She realized that sharing her story might inspire others to believe in themselves no matter how different or misunderstood they felt. In the fall, Emily enrolled in one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Her decision wasn't based solely on academic rankings. It was also because the school offered cutting-edge facilities for neuroscience and cognitive studies. Here she hoped to find answers to questions that still lingered in her mind. Why did her brain work the way it did? Could other people unlock similar abilities if given the right tools? And most importantly, how could she use her gift to make a difference in the world? The transition to university life wasn't easy. Suddenly, she was surrounded by peers who were just as driven and talented as she was. There were days when self-doubt crept in, whispering that maybe she didn't belong. But Emily reminded herself of everything she'd overcome to get here. The accusation, the rumors, the struggle to prove herself. Each challenge had shaped her into someone stronger, more resilient. So instead of shrinking back, she leaned into her discomfort, throwing herself into her studies and extracurricular activities with renewed determination. One of the highlights of her freshman year was joining a research team led by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned neuroscientist specializing in human cognition. When Dr. Rodriguez heard about Emily's abilities, she immediately invited her to participate in an ongoing project studying the intersection of creativity, problem-solving, and subconscious processing. For Emily, it was a dream come true. Not only did she get to contribute to groundbreaking research, but she also found mentors who genuinely cared about her growth. Through her work with the team, Emily discovered that her talent wasn't entirely unique. There were others like her, scattered around the world, individuals whose brains processed information in unconventional ways. Some were artists who painted vivid scenes without conscious planning. Others were musicians who composed symphonies in their heads. What set Emily apart was the precision and consistency of her mathematical insights. Scientists theorized that her synesthesia-like condition allowed her to perceive patterns and connections invisible to most people, almost like seeing the universe's hidden code. As the years passed, Emily's reputation grew beyond academia. She gave TED Talks, wrote articles, and spoke at conferences, sharing her experiences with audiences worldwide. Her message was simple yet powerful. Don't let anyone define your limits, not society, not teachers, not even yourself. Sometimes, the things that make us different are our greatest strengths. Despite her rising fame, Emily never lost sight of where she came from. During breaks, she returned to Willow Creek, visiting her old high school to talk to students about perseverance and believing in oneself. She often stopped by Mr. Thompson's classroom, catching up with him over coffee. Their relationship had transformed from one of tension to mutual respect and admiration. He often joked that he owed her an apology every time they met, but Emily always brushed it off with a laugh. "You pushed me to dig deeper," she told him during one visit. "If it weren't for you, I might never have uncovered this part of myself." Mr. Thompson smiled, shaking his head. "No, Emily. You did all the hard work. I just happened to be there at the start of your journey." Years later, Emily became a leading figure in the field of quantum mechanics, using her extraordinary abilities to tackle some of science's biggest mysteries. Her research contributed to advancements in artificial intelligence, cryptography, and space exploration. Yet she remained humble, crediting much of her success to the challenges she'd faced early on. Looking back, Emily realized that the accusation of cheating, a moment that had once seemed devastating, had actually been a turning point in her life. It forced her to confront doubts, both external and internal, and pushed her to seek answers she might otherwise have ignored. Without that experience, she might never have discovered her true potential. On a quiet evening, sitting in her home office surrounded by books and papers, Emily reflected on her journey. She thought about the small-town girl who loved math, the student accused of something she didn't do, and the woman she'd become, a trailblazer unafraid to embrace the unknown. Life, she mused, had a funny way of working out. Sometimes the hardest moments led to the brightest futures, and as she closed her laptop for the night, ready to rest and let her dreams take her to new places, she couldn't help but smile. After all, it was in those dreams that her greatest adventures often began.